Oh boy, have I been busy since we were last here. I have a horse, for one, and he's very speedy, very quick. Don't have a name for him yet, and don't have a place for him. He's just gonna walk away, but that's all right. I don't have any leads, otherwise I'd tie him up. Anyway, as I was saying, I've been a little busy working on a bit of an interior. So welcome. There's not actually a name for it. It kind of sounded like I was gonna say there was a name for it, but there's not. Anyway, I've been super busy working on an interior pretty much ever since I put the last episode up. All of my time has gone into here, and this is the perfect time of day too. The sun is setting. It's a little rainy out, so it's kind of hard to tell. But from in this opening area, there is one thing that I want to point out, and we're just going to sit here and look for just a moment, because pay attention to the light level, all right? You might have caught a glimpse of it just a second ago when I looked up, but the first trick that I use that I want to tell you guys about is using daylight in an area of an interior that has a lot of windows or natural light that should be pouring in. And so we're seeing the light level very, very subtly start to die out as the sun sets in the rain, cloudy, dull sky, until it gets to this really nice, dark, cozy lit level, right? I'm currently playing on 30 brightness, so that's gonna play a part of it. But what I did was this opening here, this entryway, it has a couple of windows up top, just these two right here. And I put a trapdoor all the way above me because that's a roof to the exterior. And that way we get a little bit of sunlight in here so that when I sleep, for example, it'll be brighter in this room than it will be anywhere else in the house. Then you combine that with the various lanterns throughout, the candles that we have helping light everything up, and you got a really cool variation in light level. Anyway, that's the first trick. We're all about learning new tricks here and getting inspired. So there's one for you, all right? I'm gonna walk you through the whole house here so you guys can get the whole deal. But here's the entryway. I wanted something that felt really big and wide open and grand once you came into the house, and I think we really nailed that. One thing I'm trying to do a lot of is use wall blocks in walls. That's not something I've ever really utilized to its full potential. And so that's something that you guys should notice a good amount all throughout the build, is the use of wall blocks in the walls. I even used it kind of up as these lips right here as well. Of course you can use it as railings, but I wanted to get a little unique, try something a little fancy. I still don't know how sold I am on lecterns with the mangrove trapdoors. I don't know if I love it or don't like it or want to change it. I'm still kind of deciding on that. But regardless, we have our entryway. To the left, we have a fancy little enchanting room. Now, you're going to notice one thing that's out of place, and that's going to be the random hopper right here. This is just kind of my really silly note to self. I don't have any pottery stuff, any of the sherds, but when I do get them, I want to put a bunch of those fancy pots all around the house, and I don't have any, so I'm going to put hoppers, or I did put hoppers, in all of the spots where I want to put one of those big pots. And the reason I chose hoppers is because it's something silly. It's obviously not supposed to be there when you see hoppers laying around. So that'll be a good note to myself. Whenever I can get those, I'm going to go through the house and I'm going to replace all of those. That being said, we have our little enchanting area on the bottom floor. Through the rest of the area down here, if we go a little bit to the right, we have our little smelting room, little utility area right under the stairs. I put my stone cutter. Gotta have the classic smooth stones on either end so that you can slide your piece of stone or whatever through the blade. We've got some furnaces, blast furnaces, the whole deal right there, nothing too crazy. This is our storage for now. I decided to go with the cellar vibe, so we got a bunch of barrels on the wall. We got some empty shelves, we got some tripwire hooks to kind of represent taps. And best of all, right here, we have the very first pickaxe I made in this world, also known as green jello with powdered sugar. Don't ask, it's a long story. And by that I mean, it's not really a long story, but it was on my mind when I named it. Moving on, we've got the brewing room down here, this little brewing station, which only has one brewing stand. It's not, it's not here for maximum efficiency. We're going for aesthetics, right? So it'll do. I don't really use potions, hardly ever, so I don't ever need to make any more than that. It's just a nice little tucked away room that you kind of have to step down to get into. I thought it was a nice little touch. And that of course wraps up the bottom floor down here. But because we got a busy day, let's get to the rest of the house here. So this little candle holder, this candlestick, there's a name for these. I don't know. You can yell at me in the comments about whatever the name for these are because I can't think of it for the life of me. But little candle holders with the copper lightning rods, and it looks really good. I got a couple of those throughout. You can see one right here. Obviously we had one in the enchanting area. You see a couple more as we go. But back to the lighting that we were talking about a little bit earlier. You can see how dark I have the hallway right here. A big part of that is because it's nighttime out, right? You can see that outside right there. But I very intentionally went about trying to make sure that the light levels throughout the house were very dynamic. There are areas that are very bright, and there are areas that are a lot dimmer, and they're not spawnable, right? Always got to make sure about that. Ever since the update during Caves and Cliffs, in which they took the light level for mob spawns down to light level 0, you can get a lot more creative with the different light levels that you use. I tried to be very sparing with things like lanterns, because it's just a direct light source. It's pretty much the simplest lighting that you can use for an interior is to just put a lantern down somewhere. And obviously you're going to have that from time to time, but I tried to avoid that where possible, or at least where I could come up with a way to. Of course, as we go, as we build more things throughout this world, we'll start to learn some more about how we can do lighting better, along with everything else. But we have reached the point in the house where we're at the kitchen, and the kitchen is definitely one of my favorite pieces. So there's a couple things to go over here. Firstly, this is kind of the main area of the kitchen that we really dressed up nice and good. We have some barrels up top. We got our fancy little stove set up right here with all of this fancy stuff. We have the auto crafters that we just got in the recent update, and that looks like a really good little fan or little smoke inhaler device above the thing. You know, don't want the smoke alarm to go off, so you turn this on, and then the dog runs away because the dog doesn't like the sound. Anyway, over here next to the sink, I played around with the bamboo trap doors a little bit. I didn't want to just have like a crafting table against there. I never like having those fully exposed when it's meant to be like a proper decoration. And we used the bamboo downstairs. I'm not sold on it. We could swap that out. If you're thinking something else could look better here, by all means, let me know. But for the sink, I went with something different. Usually you go with a cauldron. However, I had the thought to use a hopper, and specifically a hopper that's connected to the wall back there. We just kind of place it against it, so the hopper doesn't touch the ground, it just kind of curves into the wall. I just felt like that would be a unique way to do a sink, just a little different, right? We didn't have to do that, but I just wanted to get a little creative, I guess. And look at this great view as the sun is rising over the lake over there. Over here in the dining room, I went with this. I had never built chairs like this before, but I had seen this design done a number of times, and so I decided to give it a go. Just a door with a banner on it for some color, and then you can do, you know, your choice of slab and matching, or, you know, not matching signs on either side, and you get a nice little chair right here. It's a little bigger scale, right? I think for our build especially, this is really pushing it. In terms of scale, given the interior we're working with, this interior is still, at the end of the day, not as big of a scale as I would like to have my builds reach at some point, but we're just starting off. Of course, this is the first house in the world, and it's a journey. We're getting there slowly but surely. Pause. Okay, I know you saw it. That's 2 episodes in a row. Rewind the tape. Hold on, rewind, back we go. Back we go. What is this? I'm talking? I'm talking? Oh, what? I'm not even done talking. I haven't even stopped talking. Why? Why did I swerve the camera? Why am I like this? Why can't I be different? Moving on from the kitchen, we have this narrow little walkway that crosses over the main area right here that goes all the way up the building. We're going to see this kind of balcony one more time as well. And again, not sold on the railing here, but we'll see. We'll see what we can figure out. We come through here. We have some more cabinets up top using item frames with an oak slab and some spruce signs laid over top. Signs don't make item frames do the plop thing where they disappear or, you know, get hit off of the block. So this is a good way that you can do drawers. You can even use stairs if you want to have like a fancy handle shape. You can use stairs. You can use all kinds of stuff and really get creative with that. And it's not something I've ever really used in building up to this point. I've seen people do it, and I love when people do it. I think it's a nice detail, and I'm finally getting on that train as well. I decided to sprinkle in a little bit of color through some carpet through the walkway. I didn't do it everywhere because it would start to feel like it was a bit much if we did. Up in here, we just kind of have a lounge room. We have a nice little fireplace, a really tall plant. We got this little L-shaped seating arrangement, couch, sofa, chair, I don't know, whatever, however you want to interpret that. With some more shelves, we got some actual bookshelves around here now, and a great view out the window off in that direction, and surely in the future we'll have some stuff to look at through this window. But there's not too much to see in this room. Pretty simple. Little closet underneath the next staircase right here. You can just kind of walk in. I use these wall blocks a lot as doorway pieces rather than using doors or trapdoors or arches even. Any of the doorways in which we used it on, it creates this really nice transition between rooms, especially for something like a little closet under the stairs or whatnot. Obviously, you can't close it off entirely with a door there, but I think it does the trick in a unique way. And as we go up a little bit, I made a little reading nook right here. So for all of you readers out there, you'll appreciate this little detail. We got a bunch of windows, some good views, little wraparound seating arrangement right here with some candles up on there and some bookshelves, of course. Another hopper that's gonna become a pot in the future once we get some sherds going. And the final balcony, you can start to see some of the roof blocks kind of coming out right there. I could detail this up. For now, I didn't, but let me know, would you prefer that we get, like, I don't know, mangrove stairs and maybe shape that up a little bit? That's definitely something we can look at doing. Now, what we have right here, well, this is the best room in the whole house. Can anybody guess what we're looking at right here? If you guessed cat tower, you are absolutely correct. This room right here is going to be for cats. We're gonna get some cats. I don't know how many cats, but we're gonna get some cats and we're gonna put them in this room. And they have these fancy wool blocks and carpets and a big cat tower thing. It's a tower or a tree or a trower. Anyway, you get the idea. I just kind of went crazy with slabs and trapdoors and fences, and now we have a cat tree. So I'm gonna get some cats, gonna put them in this room. This is our cat room. Every good house needs a cat room, of course, clearly. And finally, up the stairs we go, we have our bedroom. It's nothing crazy, it's real simple. This window right here is where the sun rises in the morning, and so you wake up bright and early, you got the sun shining through this window to wake you up, it'll illuminate the whole place, that's kind of the idea, and so it works out really nice. I was gonna play around with doing the sort of bed frame that kind of comes up and over, but I really like how your eyes are drawn to this shape in the ceiling right here above the bed frame. I think it just works out really nice. It subtly gives you this really cool detail kind of up above where the bed is sitting. A lot more of the same details going around, a lot of potted plants around the place. That's just something I like to get crazy with and spam a little bit, and maybe I'll learn some better things to put around the house for decor instead of this eventually and have some better interiors, but it'll do for now. It'll do for now. This is our reference point moving forward. This is what we can do, and down the line we'll come back and see all of the things that we did that we do better at that time, all of the things that we hate in the future and what have you. Up here in the final couple of stairs, I haven't put anything. This is kind of the attic area. We have this little hallway right here that kind of goes to both sides, both windows, looking out the south and north directions. And then we have the actual attic up here. This is like the proper chest and barrel storage, cobwebs everywhere sort of area. So I haven't touched these areas, mostly because I don't know what I want to do with this very top floor, or 2 floors depending on how you look at it, and I already did the rest of the interior, so I was gonna leave that part to you guys. We might think on it for a while, get some more ideas, and consider what to do up here. It's definitely not an area that we're gonna see all too much of, but we at least have all the walls set up and the ceilings in place and the floors, of course, so at least it's all enclosed and it wraps up the interior, structurally speaking, so that the house can feel properly done and like a house that we can and do live in. Interiors are always something that I have enjoyed building, but they're always part of the game that I have struggled a little bit with, just with trying to think of all of the different details that you can put inside of a build. And especially all of the little tricks that you can do with interiors, like scaffolding for shelves. This isn't something that I had ever used before. It's an ever-evolving process of just picking up on the tiniest little details, tiniest little things that you can do to make interiors look a certain way. And that'll be one thing that we definitely focus on trying to nail down from build to build. At least the builds that do have interiors, not all of them will. But as we go, we're going to keep it in mind, and that'll be on our list of things to try pay attention to and learn. So we got the interior out of the way for the house, and that leaves the next glaring issue, and that is that we don't have a pathway that leads up to the house and sort of down this area right here. And once we do that, that's when we're really gonna get cracking on this episode with the moment you guys have all been waiting for, and that is, of course, the tree. Ah yes, the infamous tree, the tree I talked so much about in the last episode when we built this house and little cliff face. The amount of talk about the tree and the amount of cries and disappointment, the hearts that all simultaneously broke at the same time when I said that we weren't gonna put a tree here after all. Don't worry, do not worry, the tree is happening, and well, if you clicked on the video, you kind of spoiled it for yourself. But as of right now, it's not built, as you can see. That's something we gotta work on. So for all of you tree lovers, that includes myself, I do like a good tree. We gotta get that going, and that is going to be an absolutely massive undertaking. It's gonna require a lot of stuff. I'm gonna be chopping down a bunch of acacia. I'm gonna be mining out a lot of tuff, and then at some point, I am also going to need to do a crazy amount of leaf gathering as well. And unfortunately, none of the leaves I need are of that variety right there. I still gotta take that down. That is an eyesore. We'll get on that surely at some point. I probably won't. It's gonna stay there until I actually build something there, I swear. That's okay though. Back to the point. The point is, we gotta build the tree, but to build the tree, there's some terraforming that's needed here. So in my planning, with the size of the tree that we had, I didn't want to put it up on the hill because of the sight line that we're going for way back on that side of the river, right? That scaffolding right there sort of marks the picture frame that we're looking at. And as a matter of fact, if we stand up on this spot right here with the scaffolding and take a look at our picture frame, this is still in the way. I'll get to it, I swear. From standing right here, I can tell you that if I were to put it on the hill, it would get in the way of the house. Some of the tree foliage would start to kind of interfere with the roof. We would have to make them both work. They would start clashing. And so we don't want any of that to happen. The tree I'm building isn't tall enough to stand right next to the house and have all of its foliage and branches clear the roof of it. And so I played around with some different ideas. Where might we want to put the tree that would be best? And what I decided on was we're going to work on elevating a little bit of the terrain out front here. We're going to have a little bit of a raised section. It won't be like this. It'll be a little different. But it's going to be this sort of jut out that is raised up and then has some steep drop-offs on either side all the way around it. And at the very top of this little incline that'll sit not on that hill, but in front of it, so kind of down here, but at that height, if that makes sense. That is where we're going to put the tree. And by having it in front of the house, from where we're standing, probably 20 or so blocks, maybe a little bit more, closer to this point right here. Putting the tree there is going to allow us to build it in the scale that we have, and for it to fill out this part of the sky right here. And so with our picture frame, we're going to have the house on the cliff side over to the right here. We're going to have the tree raised up right here on top of its terrain over here. And then the canopy of the tree is going to start to fill out the sky a little bit right here. This is also going to play on perspective just a little bit. It's going to make the tree feel bigger than it actually is. Believe me when I say this tree is big. We're just going to make it look a little bigger. Nothing wrong with that. I think it's going to make our little picture in this frame look that much better. And that's something that I encourage all of you guys to consider as well in really anything you build. Not necessarily making it a picture, right? I think it's a really cool technique to play with, but specifically perspective when it comes to what you're building in relation to what's around it, right? So in this instance for us, it's this tree. This tree is a big tree, but because of where we're putting it, we are making it look bigger than it is because we have the house and cliffside as a reference, right? Similarly, we could make it look smaller than it is. If I, for example, decided that I wanted to put it a little further out and really have the house be the focus and have the house look a little more prominent, we would make the house look even bigger than it is. And to bounce off of that, I would say that the cliffside actually makes the house feel bigger than it actually is as well, just with the way it sits up there. It's definitely something that you can apply to most anything you see already built or decide that you want to build yourself. Take a look at anything you've done or you've seen other people do and just consider the perspective element of it. How are the things around it affecting it? How is it affecting the things around it? Are certain builds or pieces of a build larger or smaller in appearance? Do they appear closer or further away depending on scale and proximity to other builds? It gets crazy. It gets out of control. It can snowball effect very quick, but it's a super, super interesting thing to pay attention to when it comes to building. But enough of that. I have actually talked your ear off for the past 20 minutes. So less talking, more doing. Hey, future editing Cody, why don't you make yourself useful and do that fancy time-lapse thing? Well, we've done it. And, you know, I think a little bit ago I was talking about how it wasn't going to be a repeat of what we did over there, but it ended up being a little bit closer than I expected. But hey, we'll chalk it up to the fact that it just kind of rhymes with the terrain right there, and it's just less of an overhang and more as if the rocks just came all the way down into the terrain right there. You could probably see it better if I decide to actually get this mangrove blob out of the way one of these days, but the terrain kind of swoops up and around up this hill, and it does something similar on the other side as well, where this hill continues down. It eventually swoops kind of up and around here. This rock face does extend around the front of it and then around the back just a little bit as it starts to merge with the swoop in the terrain on the farther end. Now, the biggest thing I'm trying to accomplish here is setting ourselves up for having the tree right about here in a way that it can start to raise up into the sky, and as we get to the canopy, it starts to set itself right over top of the roof of the house and then comes out over in this direction as well, so that we fill up this space right here to kind of paint more of our picture. Now, I did play around a lot with different placements for where we could put the tree and determined that what would look best is if it started at about this height and at about this far between us right now and where the house sits over on the hill. And so because of that, we needed to build the terrain around it so that it would work and kind of cooperate with what we were going for, at least given the tree that we're getting ready to build. And so rather than turning this entire area into one large hill, I decided what would be best is to do another little cliff face and have this hill on the back side along with the farther one that the house is on, both kind of merge up into this part right here, and then give it that kind of steep drop off right here. And that's important because we don't lose the shape of the terrain over here that, of course, we built the house on in the last episode. We really want that curve to be apparent. We really want to be able to see this detail from over here, given a couple reasons. For one, obviously, this is where we're looking at it from. This is sort of the snapshot of our picture frame, if you will. And of course, because we put so much time into making that shape so unique, we obviously don't want to lose out on that. And just like we did with the original cliff face up there, I used a mix of cobblestone into mossy cobblestone into tuff to kind of color the bottom of it, give it that shading so that towards the bottom it gets a little darker, and then up towards the top of the sides it gets a little bit lighter. I even have a little bit of andesite in the side right there. The one thing I didn't use is a deep slate because there's no area that would be as dark as the darkest places underneath that one, and so I wanted to have a little bit of a difference there. And by not using deep slate in this cliffside right here, that one will always appear darker when you look at it versus how this one will appear, and I think that's good, given none of these areas are as devoid of sunlight as what you might find at the very bottom underneath where we have the house. So we've got the terrain ready to place the tree. The only thing that the terrain is lacking over here is the pathway leading up to the house, and then of course detailing all of this open plain right here. The area is devoid of any short grass or flowers or any detail whatsoever. That's something I'm kind of waiting on just a little bit. I want to get the tree done first. I want to get the roadway up to the house first, and then once we can see all of those in combination, I think I'll be ready to put some more detail into the surrounding terrain down here. But we've got our cliff face, we've got our hill for where the tree is going to go. I've been working a little bit on gathering some stuff to build the tree out of. I went a little overboard on the acacia and a little overboard on the tuff. I don't think we're going to end up using that much stuff, but all of this spruce will, for the most part, get used up, I do believe, with all of the different branches and whatnot. Another aspect of the tree that we're not going to get done right away is the foliage, the leaves, the canopy, if you will. That is going to be a process in a half to try and get done. I have a lot of leaf collecting to do. We're going to use a mix of spruce leaves, birch leaves, and also azalea leaves, and those ones are going to give me the hardest time, but at least it's not all azalea leaves, so that hopefully makes it a little bit better. But regardless, we have a tree to put into place. So now that I've painted the picture for you on what we're going to do here, why don't we get started on putting that tree in place? I think what we just did was the biggest change to this area yet. Now, there's a couple more things that you're going to see here from the clips just a moment ago. Of course, we have the tree in place, and that's all nice and good. But I went ahead and took the liberties as well to work on the roadway around the area as well. Just a little path. It meanders right down this way, curves around, and then sort of hugs the bottom of the hill over there. Something that I really wanted to bring the attention to as you walk through this area. At least from this direction, it kind of really helps sell the tree in the hill that it's on. You're definitely focusing on that a lot as you walk through here. And then from the other side, at least once you pass the hill, obviously you have the house to look forward to as you sort of traverse the pathway up and around. I've finally done it. I've finally gotten one over on recording, Cody. I can't believe it. Do you hear the quality of the mic and how it changed from the old clips to the new clips? I've done it. I've done it, and he can finally stop giving me grief. But I think even from the other approach as well, this is going to put a lot of emphasis on the tree and the hill that you walk around the base of right here, and that was very intentional. I didn't want the pathway to veer too far away from the features that we had made over here, and that was for the express purpose of bringing your attention to some of the things that we've built around here so far. Obviously, we're going to have some more stuff going on around here, but for now, I really wanted to focus on the things that we have in place at the moment. I've only built the pathway up to here, as I wasn't too sure what to do with it beyond this point, given we do have some potential future plans with the river right here, taking this part right here, widening it out to something similar to what we have going to the south, and then potentially expanding it all the way out to the ocean, which is just through this little gap right here. We're pretty close to the big open sea, so connecting it there could be a good play for us as well. Regardless, let's get up to our little standing point over here on the scaffolding and take a look at our picture frame. And there it is. We've got a little bit of fog rolling in on the house in the distance, but not too much, and we see the tree in the foreground right here. So I hope earlier on in the video I conveyed exactly what I was thinking, and even if it didn't quite click, you can surely see what we're going for here now. By putting that hill in place where we did, it allowed us to put the tree in a perfect position so that the branches over to the right side and soon-to-be foliage on those branches sits just above the house with enough of a gap that it doesn't obscure any of the house, and we've done enough to slowly fill out the sky around the house right there so that when we are on the approach from over on this side of the river, this is the view that we are greeted with. And I think we've gotten that down pretty well from the whole picture frame perspective, being that this is sort of our image right here, this is sort of our canvas and what we're trying to work with. I think this tree adds so much to what we have going on, and it's only going to get better from here. I've mentioned it a couple times before, but there's a couple other things I want to do on the hill long term. Maybe nothing as fancy or large as what we have going on with this tree, but I definitely want to add a couple more bits of intrigue. Perhaps a tree a little further back in the distance just to have kind of peeking up over the hills. Maybe another tree kind of up on the peak of the hill, something that wouldn't really take your eye away from this too much, so something a little simpler maybe. And then of course we shift our view over to the right side of the house and the tree, and we have this forest right here. Now that forest, that is going to be our focus in the next episode, so I don't want to divulge too much here, but let's just say I got a lot of wood chopping to do, and we are going to need all of the logs we get. We've got quite a lot of work cut out for us in the near future that I'm also really excited for. Back to the tree and what we just put together though, I want to go through a couple of things with you guys. Firstly, with the road that I put in place. I think for the scale that we're going for in this world, it was important not to get too crazy carried away with the pathway. Now, I've done a lot of pathways with a lot of different materials over the years in various builds that I've done. And typically, they're a lot more detailed than what we went for here. But again, given the scale that we're working on, we gotta be a little careful that we don't over-detail some of the smaller things that don't quite need it, especially when you have builds like this house on the hill, like this huge tree right here. Things that are gonna only get bigger or remain at this scale at the smallest, things that take a lot of time and attention to detail, and things that you want your eyes to be drawn to. See, here's the thing. If we detail this road too much, your eyes are going to be taken away from the house. They're going to be taken away from the tree. They're going to be taken away from all of the other things that we do that are on a much larger and more important scale. So we've got the path blocks. I mixed in some oak slabs for wherever you need to step up. They match better than spruce does, and I've always used spruce before, but oak just seems to be a better play here. At least in this instance, I thought it would be a nice way to change it up. To go alongside that, along the edges, we have some coarse dirt patches, we have some packed mud patches, and of course we have some stripped jungle. That last one right there, that was something new that I tried to experiment with. I figured jungle wood would be a pretty close texture, but I didn't want to have any more of the plank texture since we already have it going on in the slabs right here. It felt like it might be a little too much, so I decided on the stripped jungle log, and a lot of the colors that we have right here are very close to this path block. It's like this desaturated greenish yellow sort of color, and then you get like these pinks, and those match a lot closer with the oak wood, for example, as well as the packed mud right here. And so it's a really nice block to kind of blend everything together. And while it's not a perfect transition block, I thought it was a nice little thing to just sprinkle in a little bit here and there in the road. And I think just like that, it's still a very simple road, nothing that takes your eye too far off of anything else that you want to be focusing on, but instead acts as a nice little supporting piece for this roadway. And I think we'll see a lot more of this style as we cross the river and make our way further into the world off in that direction. I also played around a little bit with some mossy patches and using some mossy carpets in those areas just for that tiny little bit of depth, that little tiny change in elevation where you can just see them poking up a little bit. It just adds that extra little detail among the grass so that it's not too much of the same thing on repeat. And the same idea was had with the ferns. We have a couple ferns sprinkled about. I don't have a ton, so I had to be a little sparing on where we use them. But I use the ferns as a nice way to add a different shade of green, as well as a little bit of a different texture among the grass right here. So I tried to be particular with how I used it and where I put the ferns. You can see we have some various patches of tall grass where we also have some tall ferns sort of in that area. There's a little bit going on right here, and I started to run out of ferns a little bit. And then of course with the smaller versions, the ferns are sort of in splotches, just here and there amongst the grass, and it does a really good job at breaking up the grass. If you were to look at this area, for example, where I don't have any ferns, it's very easy to just kind of skip over it because of how similar it looks. It's all the same thing on repeat. But if you look at something like that, and then you shift your view to something like this, you can see just how much it adds to the place. It's such a small little detail, but getting that different shade of green through the ferns and even that different shape, it just helps that little bit. You don't even notice it most of the time, unless it were pointed out, like in this case, but it does a lot to just kind of help the detailing in a big field like this especially. There we go, it's getting a little dark, and while this place does look really good at night, I don't have any lighting out here, nor do I plan to, because at the end of the day, I don't care if a bunch of mobs are spawning here. We're going for a very specific look. This is going to be the definition of form over function, at least this part of the world right here. I think something that we could play around with is some lighting along the roadways at the very least, but it's not going to be functional in the sense that it spawn-proofs anything. It would just be for some ambient nighttime aesthetic. The last bit of detail that I did in the terrain is a little bit of these bushes that you see around. Pretty simple. I just tried to do some sort of light bush shape, nothing crazy. I didn't want them to be too big. I felt like them being closer to the ground would be good, so they're no higher than 2 blocks at any given point. And one thing that you're not really going to notice from as far back as on the road is that we use 2 different types of leaves in these bushes. We have oak leaves right here, and then we have some acacia leaves right here. And while they provide the same exact colors, they're just a little bit of a different shape in a way that gives the dark oak leaves a little bit more of this darker green, whereas the acacia leaves don't have as much of that dark color. And so as a result of that, it is the slightest little difference, but just enough that I put the oak leaves towards the center and underneath part of the bushes here, and then I tried to keep the acacia leaves on the outer edges and on top, just to play around with that shading effect that little bit more like we have been with everything we've done up to this point. And again, you're not really going to notice it too much from the path, but I like to think that it adds a little bit, so hey, we did it, it's staying, and we might do a little bit more of it as we go. We'll get to our fast horse right here, which we still need a name for, of course. By all means, drop some name suggestions for the horse if you have any. I've been good about naming everything so far in this world. We've got some good names for some of the tools here, just whatever's on my mind at the time. But to the elephant in the room, that is of course the tree right here. And so you're probably wondering a little bit about what we did here. It's a mix of tough and acacia logs for that gray color, as well as some oak and spruce for the brown colors. Now, trees are something I don't have a ton of experience with, and the trees that I do have experience with up to this point are primarily custom spruce trees, and even then, nothing quite on the scale of this. So a lot of this was a whole new experience for me and trying to figure it out as I go. It went through a couple different versions before I got to a state where I was pretty happy with it. At first, there were no fences whatsoever, and originally the branches were a little thicker, but it felt a little too thick on the branches, so I went through and we changed it to mostly slabs. There's some stairs, some trapdoors in there just to kind of help get shapes a certain way. And then eventually I decided that the fences would be good for the tiny little branches going every which way. Normally, I would avoid fences on trees smaller than this, but I think once we start getting to a scale like this and even bigger potentially, it does sort of help to add that feeling of these smaller little branches going every which way, especially considering that our focus on these builds, at least up to this point, is not from close up, but instead, of course, from further away. And when you're further away like this and you start to play around with getting the fog on the horizon, and you're playing around with all these sight lines that are going to eventually have other builds that are a little bit closer, doing something like the fences on the tree right here are a perfect little touch, because back here, it looks infinitely better than it does up close. And I think a big part of that, of course, is the fences. That's the biggest difference here in terms of the look close up versus farther out. So just something to keep in mind with trees that you might be building on your own. The fences are usually something that you can kind of fall into the trap of using on any tree ever. But at least in my experience and up to this point, I think I like it better when it's for something that's at a distance and on a larger scale. As for the discolorations in the tree, that is a touch of detail that I had never really used before, but it was something that I recently had taken some notes on from watching some other builders start to incorporate it. This sort of gray color is actually something that's pretty close to a lot of real trees. If you were to go out and find some of the nearest trees to you, I guess depending on what trees there are, you're going to see colors that are a lot closer to this than they are to the actual oak wood color we have in the game. And especially once you zoom out, like we've been talking about, if I were to get up on this hill, as you get further away, the colors blend together really nice as well. They end up working together a lot better from back here than they do up close. And again, that is going to be a recurring theme with almost everything we do in this world. It's something new that I'm playing around with, but I do think it's a worthwhile thing to do, because at the end of the day, as you build up a world, as you get more things put into it, most of the things that you see are going to be at a distance. If you consider this is our house right here, where we have all of our storage for the foreseeable future, we're going to be building up things out in the distance over there. We're going to be building things out in the distance over here. We have this tree, which isn't that far away, but it's still not close up from where we are right now. If you picture what this world might look like a month down the line, 6 months down the line, a year, whatever it is, we're going to have so many things to look at from a distance as we enter or exit our house that naturally it becomes a case where most of the times we're seeing things, it's from afar, of course. And the same thing goes the other way around. As we're building all of these things out in the distance, we're going to start to see the tree and our house and the hill that it's on from a farther distance most of the time compared to right now when we're building it, and of course we see it all up close. Just another thing to keep in mind as you build up a world or decide on what you want to build and how you want to build it and how much of the shading effects you want to use, how it looks close up versus far away. I think that for me is going to be one of the more difficult challenges, is focusing on how a build looks farther away rather than it does close up, because as I've mentioned up to this point, I have spent all of my time building in Minecraft, the years that I've been playing, focusing on how a build looks close up and never really worrying about how it looked farther away. So it's one of those mental things that I've got to try and teach myself a little bit better, is focusing on farther away, focusing on shading, and not worrying too much, not overthinking how it looks close up. So there's your challenge for today. Try and do that yourself. Try to keep that in mind. How does it look from far away, rather than how does it look close up? But now that we've gotten the main build for the day out of the way, and I've kind of explained what's going on there, there's a little bit of some smaller things that I want to try and take care of that'll help us out long term. The first thing on that list is this skeleton spawner we found in the last episode. So grab some tools, because we got to get busy. And we've done it. Flawless execution. Nothing went wrong. Perfect. They'll be showing up any moment now. Aha! And now to reap the benefits. I don't have a sword. And now to reap the benefits. Flawless. And that's how it's done. So while we're down here, having completed the skeleton farm now and being able to collect some bones and arrows, not really that I need the arrows, but the bones are good for bone meal. I'm going to sit here and whack their feet a couple of times. I wanted to point out that I don't want this series to be strictly about building. At least not in the traditional sense. Of course, that's going to be the main focus. However, there's also another element that, for me personally, I think I would have a lot of fun experimenting with, and that is, of course, redstone. Now, this contraption here required 0 redstone, but it is a part of the technical side of Minecraft. Now, the technical side of Minecraft is a side that I, myself, am not very familiar with. It's something that I've never gotten into over the years. However, as of recent, and especially playing on the one-shot SMP with all of the creators over there, a lot of them being technical players, I've learned a lot about how interesting that side of the game can be, and how fun it can be to explore that side. This includes everything from farms to redstone contraptions to all sorts of things that require you to think really outside of the box to accomplish. Now, to add on to that, I don't want to just be another person who goes and picks out this person or that person's YouTube tutorial and build that exact farm or that exact contraption in our world. No, I actually want to try and challenge myself to come up with everything at least based on what I know up to that point and anything I can remember from the past. So what do I mean exactly by that? This contraption right here, I made completely off of memory based on previous mob farms I had made, which of course, you know, people had designed before, but it's become such common knowledge. I've done mob farms so many times now that I just naturally go to this design right here to make it happen. And I think most people do as well, right? So I want to expand that thought. Here is our very first example about the simplest thing that you can possibly do is take a mob spawner and turn it into a grinder like this. So I want to take that concept and I want to try to apply it to some other things as well. We're talking things as big as moss farms, things as little as a manual mud farm, things like a glow lichen or a vine setup. We're talking things like a creeper farm, things like farming sugarcane and a smelter and you name it, right? All of these different contraptions that I think would be useful for us, whether it's to gather certain blocks that we could build with or are just useful generally speaking in the world. This is going to be something that I want to feature in these episodes alongside the fancy things that we build as well. A lot of the survival element has been behind the scenes, the trading with villagers, the breeding the villagers, going and gathering some better tools, mining for some ores, collecting mob drops, all of that sort of stuff, right? Gathering materials. I haven't really shown a lot of that on camera, and that is very intentional. I didn't want this to be a traditional Let's Play in that sense. I wanted to focus on some of the other elements of the game. So we take our fancy building that we've done up to this point in the series and we combine that with this challenge to myself to improve on the technical aspect of the game, but do it in a way where I force myself to figure it out without using other people's tutorials. I think that could be a really interesting way to learn the game. And it could also be a really effective way to learn how to get better at redstone and how to train my brain to think better when it comes to problem solving in this game. And problem solving generally speaking, I suppose as well. And would you look at that? We haven't even been here all that long and we've already got about a stack of bones, which is gonna go great for all of the grass that we got a bone meal. Well, I just got back to record the outro, and of course it started raining right as we did. But hey, it's a pretty good view, and it's a nice atmosphere, especially with these little droplets in the water. This video has gone on for quite a while, even longer than the last one, so let's go ahead and get ready to wrap this up. I have a pretty good idea as to where we're going to pick up on the next episode. It's going to be a little bit of finishing that tree, I do believe, and then we've got some other stuff to do over here as well, and I'm really excited to see all of that come together. But as always, I do want to take the time to shout out everyone who's supporting the content over on Patreon. Everyone who's over there, you've gone above and beyond, so I appreciate it. It means the world and allows me to continue to work on this full time. I currently have a poll up on the community tab. You've probably seen it, maybe you voted on it by now, and that was asking what day would be best for these releases, and by the looks of it, it looks to be a pretty solid Wednesday. So odds are you're watching this on a Wednesday, maybe a little after the fact. And with that being the case, I also want to mention that I'm going to start doing some live streams from this world. And those streams are going to be on the stream day after I upload. So if we're going to be looking for Wednesdays on uploads, we're going to be looking at Fridays for the streams from the Inspire world. And those, of course, are over on Twitch. Don't worry, though. If you think you might forget, I'm going to post on the community tab whenever we do go live from this world with a link to our Twitch channel, and then you guys can access it from there. So keep an eye out for that. And in the meantime, let me know down below in the comments what you liked about the episode, what you didn't like, anything like that. And if you don't have much to comment, just comment a smiley face if you made it this far into the video. Because to sit through all of this episode, you are a real one, and I appreciate you. But until next time, I hope in this video you could find a little bit of inspiration.